Ladies and gentlemen, most people believe that when they are hurt, they need to react immediately. The emotions rise quickly: anger, sadness, confusion, and the urge to express everything all at once feels almost uncontrollable. You want to send that long message, ask those burning questions, or demand an explanation. It feels justified, even necessary, but in that moment, what feels natural is not always what is powerful. Reacting emotionally often hands over control to the very person who caused the pain, because your response becomes dependent on their actions rather than grounded in your own strength. When you react, you are operating from a place of impulse. Your words may come out sharper than intended, or more vulnerable than you would later feel comfortable with. You might reveal how deeply affected you are, hoping that they will understand and change. But instead, what often happens is that your reaction reinforces a pattern. It shows them that their behavior can trigger you, influence you, and keep you emotionally engaged, even if that engagement is negative. In a way, reacting keeps you tied to them. Responding, on the other hand, is completely different. It requires a pause. It asks you to step back from the immediate surge of emotion and observe what you're feeling without letting it dictate your behavior. That pause is where your power begins. It may only be a few seconds, a few minutes, or even a few hours, but it changes everything. Because in that space, you are no longer controlled by the situation, you are choosing how to show up in it. A calm response doesn't mean you are unaffected. It doesn't mean you are suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. It means you are processing those emotions internally before deciding how or if they need to be expressed externally. This shift alone makes your presence feel different. Instead of being predictable and reactive, you become steady and grounded. There is also something incredibly disarming about calmness. When someone expects an emotional reaction and doesn't receive it, they are forced to confront a version of you they are not used to. It creates a moment of uncertainty for them. They may start to wonder if their actions even had the impact they intended, or if you are no longer as affected as before. This isn't about playing games, it's about no longer giving your emotional energy away so freely. When you choose to respond rather than react, your communication becomes more intentional. You don't say everything you feel, you say only what aligns with your self-respect. Sometimes that means saying very little. Sometimes it means setting a boundary in a calm, clear way without raising your voice or over-explaining. And sometimes it means choosing not to engage at all. Not engaging is often misunderstood. People think silence equals weakness or avoidance, but in many cases, it is the strongest response you can give. When you don't react, you are showing that you are not easily pulled into emotional chaos. You are showing that your peace is more important than proving a point or winning an argument. That kind of restraint takes strength. Another important aspect of responding is emotional control. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop letting your feelings control your actions. You acknowledge the hurt. You allow yourself to feel it, but you don't let it push you into decisions you might regret later. Over time, this builds a sense of confidence within you. You begin to trust yourself more, knowing that no matter what happens, you won't lose control of how you carry yourself. It also changes how others perceive you. When you are not easily triggered, people become more careful with how they approach you. They recognize that you are not someone who can be manipulated through emotional reactions. This naturally shifts the dynamic in your favor, without you needing to force anything. Learning to respond instead of react is not something that happens overnight. It requires awareness and practice. In the beginning, you might still feel the urge to react strongly, and that's okay. The goal is not perfection, it's progress. Each time you pause, each time you choose calm over chaos, you are strengthening a new habit. Eventually, this way of handling situations becomes natural. You no longer feel the need to prove your emotions in the moment. You become more selective with your energy, more intentional with your words, and more protective of your peace. And in doing so, you create a version of yourself that is not easily shaken. That is where real power lies, not in how loudly you react, but in how quietly and confidently you respond. Silence and unpredictability are often misunderstood. Many people think silence is a weakness, a sign that you have nothing to say or that you are avoiding confrontation. In reality, silence can be one of the strongest forms of communication when it comes from a place of clarity and self-control. It is not about ignoring or suppressing your emotions. It is about choosing not to express everything impulsively. It is about Understanding that not every feeling needs to be spoken out loud, and not every situation deserves your immediate reaction. When someone hurts you, they usually expect a certain kind of response. They expect questions, emotional messages, arguments, or attempts to fix what went wrong. These reactions follow a predictable pattern, and when you respond in that way, you stay within the script they are already familiar with. But the moment you step outside of that pattern, everything shifts. When you become less predictable, you disrupt their expectations, and that disruption creates uncertainty. Unpredictability in this context is not about being inconsistent or playing games. It is about no longer reacting in ways that are easy to anticipate. It is about being guided by your self-respect rather than your emotions. When your actions are rooted in your own standards instead of their behavior, you naturally become harder to read. And when someone cannot easily read you, they cannot easily influence you. Silence plays a key role in this shift. When you stop over-explaining yourself, you remove the need for validation from the other person. Many times, people feel the urge to explain their feelings in detail, hoping the other person will finally understand. But over-explaining often leads to feeling even more vulnerable, especially if the other person is not willing to listen or change. By choosing silence, you are not denying your feelings. You are protecting them. There is a certain strength in saying less. When your words are limited but intentional, they carry more weight. You are no longer speaking to fill the space or to seek reassurance. You are speaking with purpose, and sometimes the most powerful message is no message at all. When you don't respond the way someone expects, it forces them to reflect in a way they wouldn't have otherwise. Unpredictability also changes the emotional dynamic. If your mood and behavior are no longer tied directly to how someone treats you, they lose the ability to control your emotional state. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached. It means you become stable. Your happiness, your peace, and your confidence are no longer dependent on their actions. And that kind of independence is both rare and powerful. People are naturally drawn to what they cannot fully understand. When you stop being predictable, you create a sense of mystery around your reactions. Instead of knowing exactly how you will respond, they are left guessing. This doesn't mean you are trying to confuse them intentionally. It means you are no longer living in a way that revolves around their expectations. Another important aspect is emotional discipline. Silence gives you time to think, to process, and to decide what truly deserves your attention. Instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, you create space between what you feel and how you act. In that space, you gain control. You are no longer driven by temporary emotions but guided by long-term self-respect. This approach also protects your energy. Constantly reacting, explaining, and engaging in emotional conversations can be draining. It takes a toll on your mental and emotional well-being. By choosing silence when necessary and being selective with your responses, you conserve your energy for things that truly matter. You stop investing in situations that do not add value to your life. Unpredictability also means that you are not easily pulled back into old patterns. If someone is used to a certain version of you, one that reacts quickly, forgives easily, or seeks constant reassurance, they may try to trigger that response again. But when you change your behavior, when you respond differently, you break that cycle. You show that you are no longer the same person they once knew. Over time, this creates a shift not only in how others see you, but also in how you see yourself. You begin to recognize your own strength. You realize that you don't need to say everything, prove everything, or react to everything. You become more confident in your ability to handle situations with calmness and control. Silence and unpredictability, when used with intention, are not about creating distance for the sake of it. They are about creating space for your own growth. They allow you to step back, reassess, and move forward in a way that aligns with your values. Instead of being caught in emotional cycles, you rise above them. And in that space of calm, controlled unpredictability, something powerful happens. You stop being easy to hurt, not because you don't feel, but because you no longer give others the power to dictate how you respond. One of the most important shifts you can make after being hurt is to stop seeking validation from the person who caused the pain. It's a natural instinct to want reassurance. You want them to acknowledge what they did, to understand how it affected you, and to somehow prove that you still matter, but the more you depend on someone else to confirm your worth, the more power you give them over how you feel about yourself. Validation, when it comes from others, is temporary. It can lift you up in the moment, but it can just as easily disappear, and when it does, you're left questioning yourself all over again. This creates a cycle where your confidence rises and falls based on how someone treats you. That cycle is exhausting, and more importantly, it places your self-worth in someone else's hands. The truth is, your value does not change based on someone's behavior toward you. If someone fails to appreciate you, it does not mean you are less worthy. It simply means they are unable or unwilling to see your value. But when you internalize their actions as a reflection of your worth, you begin to shrink yourself. You start to overthink, overanalyze, and even change parts of who you are just to fit their expectations. This is where the shift needs to happen. Instead of asking, "Why don't they see my worth?" ask, "Why am I looking to them to define it?" That question is uncomfortable, but it is also empowering because it redirects your focus from them to yourself. When you stop seeking validation externally, you begin to build it internally. This means recognizing your own qualities, your own strengths, and your own standards without needing someone else to confirm them. It means understanding that your worth is not something you earn through someone's approval. It is something you already possess. This doesn't mean you stop caring about how others treat you. Respect and appreciation still matter, but the difference is that you no longer rely on those things to feel secure within yourself. You appreciate them when they are present, but you are not broken when they are absent. There is also a quiet confidence that comes from self-validation. When you know your value, you don't feel the need to constantly prove it. You don't feel the urge to explain why you deserve better or to convince someone to treat you differently. Instead, you simply align your actions with your standards. If someone cannot meet those standards, you create distance not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Trying to prove your worth often leads to overcompensation. You may give more, do more, or tolerate more than you should, hoping that eventually they will recognize your value. But this approach rarely works. In fact, it can have the opposite effect. The more you overextend yourself, the more your efforts are taken for granted. And the more you try to prove your worth, the more it can appear as though you are unsure of it yourself. True confidence doesn't need to be loud or forceful. It is steady and calm. It shows in the way you carry yourself, in the boundaries you set, and in the way you choose where to invest your energy. When you are secure in your worth, you don't chase attention or approval. You attract respect through your presence. Another important part of this shift is letting go of the need for closure from others. Many people feel stuck because they are waiting for an apology, an explanation, or some form of acknowledgement. While those things can be helpful, they are not always guaranteed, and waiting for them keeps you tied to the situation. Closure, in many cases, is something you give yourself. It comes from accepting what happened, learning from it, and deciding how you want to move forward. It comes from choosing your peace over prolonged confusion. When you stop waiting for someone else to provide that sense of resolution, you free yourself from their influence. Focusing on your self-worth also changes the way you approach relationships in the future. You become more selective, not out of fear, but out of clarity. You recognize what you deserve and what you will never longer accept. This makes it easier to walk away from situations that do not align with your values, rather than trying to fix or force them. Over time, this mindset strengthens your emotional independence. You become less affected by inconsistency, less shaken by rejection, and more grounded in your own identity. You no longer measure your value based on how someone else treats you, because you have already defined it for yourself, and that is where true freedom lies. When your sense of worth comes from within, no one has the ability to take it away from you. You stop chasing validation, stop proving your value, and start living in alignment with who you truly are. At some point after the hurt, the confusion, and the emotional back and forth, there comes a moment where you have to make a decision. Will you continue centering your life around what happened and how someone treated you, or will you shift that focus back to yourself? Making yourself the priority again is not selfish, it is necessary. It is the moment where you stop pouring energy into something that drains you and start investing in something that strengthens you, your own life. When someone hurt you, it's easy to lose yourself in the situation. Your thoughts revolve around them. What they said, what they did, what they meant, what you could have done differently. It becomes a cycle of overthinking that slowly takes over your mental space. and without realizing it, you begin to neglect your own needs, your own goals, and your own well-being. Your world starts to shrink, centered around a person who may not even be thinking about you in the same way. Breaking out of that cycle requires a conscious shift. It means deciding that your time, your energy, and your attention are too valuable to be consumed by someone else's actions. It means redirecting that focus inward, not in a way that isolates you, but in a way that rebuilds you. Making yourself the priority starts with small intentional choices. It could be as simple as returning to routines that make you feel grounded, taking care of your health, organizing your day, or spending time doing things you genuinely enjoy. These actions may seem minor, but they send a powerful message to yourself that you matter, that your life continues, and that your happiness is not dependent on anyone else. It also means reconnecting with your personal growth. When you invest in yourself, whether it's learning something new, improving your skills, or pursuing a passion, you begin to expand your world again. You create new experiences, new goals, and new sources of fulfillment that are not tied to the person who hurt you. And as your world expands, their importance naturally begins to fade. Another key part of this shift is setting boundaries. Prioritizing yourself means recognizing what you will and will not accept moving forward. It means no longer tolerating behavior that disrespects you, even if it comes from someone you care about. Boundaries are not about controlling others, they are about protecting your own peace. And once you start enforcing them, you create a space where only healthy, respectful interactions are allowed. There is also a difference between being available and being accessible. When you constantly make yourself available to someone who has hurt you, you reinforce the idea that your time and presence can be taken for granted. But when you become more selective, when you are not always immediately responsive or emotionally available, you begin to change that dynamic. You show that your energy is not something that can be accessed without consideration. This doesn't mean you become distant or closed off from everyone. It simply means you become intentional about where your energy goes. You give your time to people and activities that add value to your life rather than those that take away from it. Focusing on yourself also strengthens your sense of identity. When you are deeply connected to your own goals, values, and passions, you are less likely to lose yourself in someone else. You know who you are outside of any relationship, and that sense of self becomes your foundation. No matter what happens, you remain grounded. Over time, this shift creates a noticeable change in your energy. You become more confident, more independent, and more at peace. You no longer seek constant reassurance or attention because you are already fulfilled within your own life. And that kind of energy is powerful. It naturally attracts respect and often curiosity. Ironically, when you stop making someone the center of your world, they may start to notice the difference. They may sense that you are no longer as easily affected, no longer as available, and no longer revolving around them. But by that point, your focus has already changed. You are not doing it to get a reaction. You are doing it because you have chosen yourself. That is the most important part of this process. The goal is not to make them realize what they lost or to make them chase you. The goal is to rebuild a life where your happiness, your peace, and your sense of worth are not dependent on anyone else. It is about becoming whole on your own rather than waiting for someone else to complete you. When you truly make yourself the priority, something shifts internally. You stop chasing, stop overgiving, and stop settling for less than you deserve. You become more aligned with your values, more protective of your energy, and more intentional with your choices. And in that space, you realize something powerful. The moment you chose yourself, you took back control of your life. Thank you, a white heavy check mark